Joe Michaels, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you. I'm really happy to talk to you.
It's great to have you on the show. You are a director at the High Point University. You're also a former director at NBC's Today Show and a real veteran in television production. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, you have been in media for since the 70s, I think. Yeah, you started at NBC Sports in 1979. So the media landscape has changed a lot since. So can you tell a little bit about how your career started and how you got into media?
Well, actually, I did start in NBC Sports in 1979, but I started at NBC in 1974. I actually was very, very lucky to get a job as a associate director at NBC Radio, and pretty much right out of college, within a year of me graduating college. And I was brought up at NBC. I learned everything at NBC. When I started at NBC Radio, it was the generation that had started in television and radio who were starting to retire. And that's why I was lucky enough to get involved in the business then. Um, and along with that, doing radio news and entertainment, lots of celebrity interviews. They, at the time, and you're too young to remember this, but at the time, when there was a big event like an All-Star game or a World Series, radio was just as big as TV back then. The listening audience was enormous. So I was hired to produce and somewhat direct, because there wasn't a lot of directing in radio. Um, the radio coverage of the All-Star game, the World Series, for a few years there. And we actually switched the talent from radio to television. So one night the talent would do radio, and the next night they'd be on TV, and the next night they'd be on radio. And it was a big deal back then. I didn't even realize how big deal it was. I was brought up by a dad who played baseball in his whole life, played baseball as in not even minor leagues. He played in local teams and things like that. And so I loved baseball, and at the time it was such a thrill to even be at an All-Star game or a World Series. But that's actually where I started. When I got into TV, I was basically just a general associate director moving around. But in 1979, as you say, was the first time I was asked to go to the Olympics for the 1980 Olympics, which we never went because President Carter had boycotted them. So we only covered the Olympics that year as a news story. However, I loved the people there and I loved everybody I worked with. So I actually stayed in TV sports for a good 12 years after that, I believe.
Interesting. And so you say that you're a director. So in that role, what does that mean when it comes to producing and directing at TV?
So sports directors are different than entertainment and news directors. Sports directors, their main and only job is to cut the cameras, and to pick the cameras, to cut the cameras, and to tell a story with the sport that you're covering. Um, in sports, in television sports especially, you'll see a producer being as active as far as calling replays and knowing all the stats and numbers of what's going on in the game. I always joked I would have to ask somebody if the person on first base was fast or not, or did they steal a lot this year? Even though I tried to keep up, a lot of it was done by a producer. Um, in regular entertainment and in other news shows, the director basically has the coverage of everything. But as a director, you're telling the story. I worked as an associate director for a long time, which basically is somebody who keeps track of all those kind of graphics and tapes that would go into a broadcast. So I know there's a famous director at Fox Sports right now who says it's as close to being on a team as you can ever be without being on a team. just broadcasting live television.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're doing live TV, it's no do-overs, right? There's no
Right,
retakes there.
right.
So how's that pressure with sports that is also very unpredictable to work?
Early on, there's a lot of pressure. Um, Once you get used to it, you use that pressure. That pressure becomes excitement for how great you're going to do. I remember being very, very nervous early on, and as you progress, the idea of being nervous kind of goes away, and that becomes energy, and you get really pumped up for a game or any kind of live broadcast. I've done I don't even want to tell you how many thousands of live broadcasts I've done, either in sports or news or entertainment. Um, but I still get those little butterflies in your belly before you go on, and I think they get you really excited to do what you're about to do. I directed the um, last year. I directed the Democratic Convention for all the networks. That's the kind of a pool feed. And I said, somebody in the truck said to me, "Are you a little nervous?" I said, "I am, but that's why this is going to be really good." So
Exactly.
those nerves really help you, I think.
I think so too. And a lot of elite athletes have spoken about that too, that they also get nervous, but it's how you use that nervousness. And,
A hundred percent.
it's like a trigger, that, okay, now this nervousness means game time, and then you go.
And you go from there. And those of us who really love what we do, that for me, the second we come up on the first camera, it's just from there on, it's just heaven. It's just so much fun to do. And I've talked to athletes about that too. It's very hard to explain or to teach somebody that, but those nerves become your excitement and get you going. And I'm sure many athletes have talked about it.
Yeah. And athletes also talks about putting in the reps. I have done 215 episodes, something right now. I think you mentioned before you didn't know exactly how many thousands of live episodes. I think I read somewhere it's over 5,000 you did for the Today Show. So I mean
I, I
that's a
directed
lot
the
of
Today Show for a very long time.
that's a
A
lot of
lot of
reps.
And what's funny is it's a lot of hours.
Mm.
When I started on the show, it was only a 2-hour show. When I left, it was a 3-hour show, and now it's a 4-hour show.
Mm.
So that's a lot of live TV. And to me, I think live television, live sports on television, almost anything you do live, um, just brings that excitement. There's nothing like it. And I totally agree with the fact that television production is a team sport. There's no doubt about it. And it really is. Doing a football game or a college basketball game is as close as you could possibly come to playing. I really think so. It's a really the excitement is there.
Yeah, definitely. So take us behind the scenes, like one of
Mhm,
these TV show. You're covering a game. What's
mhm.
happening behind the scene? Your role as the director, the producer,
Um,
everyone else.
there's a lot of noise. People have come into a TV truck especially for a sporting event. There's a lot going on. A director is keyed into all the cameras they have. A producer is keyed into the content, and constantly talking about what's going on the field. I mean, opening ceremonies of an Olympics, for instance. We had upward of 40 something cameras, which is nothing compared to Super Bowls nowadays that have 200 cameras. But we had a handful of 40 to 60 cameras, and one person can't watch that. So a producer and associate directors, everybody's watching what's going on and reacting. And it's the director's job to react to the video. And as I always say it, I'm your eyes as a viewer. I want to show you what I could show you so you exactly know what's happening and what you want to see. If there's somebody, say on a football game, somebody's on a bench and their head's down and they've just ruined a play for the team, I want to show them. I want you to see what's going on. And I think that's the job of a live director, almost in any venue with a live production. Producers are constantly keeping you updated on what's going on, the storyline. And a producer, I'm sure you know that producers talk to talent in their ear. through an IFB, they're constantly telling the talent what's going on. Besides that, there's a technical director who's actually hitting the buttons and focused on what the director's saying. There's production assistants, there's graphic coordinators, there's statisticians, there's audio people, there's graphics, there's video playback, replays. This is all going on at the same time. And I always tell anybody who wants to get into this, if you can't multitask, this is not for you because you have to be aware of all these things going on. Um, the pre-production for any show, any live show, or any show really, I think is the most important part. I joked about having somebody on first and not sure if they're a fast runner or not. Pre-production is really important, and visualizing how something's going to look is really important. I will tell you a funny story. I worked with probably probably the godfather of sports television, a man named Harry Coyle. Harry did the first baseball games on television, um, literally with only a handful of cameras in black and white, with small crews. He is in the Broadcast Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame as a broadcaster. Harry, in those days, there was not color television; it was black and white. So Harry called it the white team and the black team because that's how we saw it. And he really didn't even know the score sometimes. He was a brilliant director. And he told stories. He directed a couple of no-hitters, which could be boring, believe it or not, even though it's exciting to see. But he could make a story with close-ups of pitchers' hands and batters' eyes. And he was a brilliant, brilliant director. And I think that goes to show you what somebody who's really, really good can do with sports, especially sports, but almost in any venue. And again, he did so many things. Lots of us learned from him. And if you watch baseball on television anywhere, the way the cameras are set up, the way it's cut, was the way that Harry invented it. To this day, it's very, very interesting to watch. Very interesting. Um, but there's lots of noise and there's lots of people talking, and the director is constantly cutting cameras and watching the story. I will tell you that doing a baseball game or a football game, a very exciting game for a director, you can actually lose weight doing it. That's how much energy you're putting into it.
Yeah, I understand that. And you mentioned, for example, you said a football game and you need to cover if someone is disappointed, someone like
Right,
what's going on in the game. But then you have at an Olympic game, there might be some different sports going on at the same time. And then you have to
right.
prioritize which event, which sport, what's happening there. So then you have that additional element of complexity.
So that is usually at an every time at an Olympics, there's a place called an IBC, the International Broadcast Center. And within there, for every nation, usually has a control area in there. And at NBC Sports, they build a gigantic complex with at least two studios. And what you're talking about is um, basically a primetime game, a primetime broadcast where they're bringing in all the different venues, whether they're live or taped. And that those producers and those directors, I've never directed that, but those producers and directors are just juggling everything that's happening at the same time. And it's fascinating to watch. I watched it at the Olympics in Atlanta. A really good friend of mine who was an incredible sports director. His name was Bucky Guntz. Bucky would be the director of that. He was also the senior director of NBC Sports for a long time. And I watched them juggle things. They see something happen at boxing and they go over to boxing and show you that. Nowadays, as a viewer, I can go on television and I can watch all the different sports on all the different cable channels. But in those days, they were the ones that were picking what you were seeing in that one broadcast. And just remember, every venue had its own sports trucks and directors and producers. So that's an enormous, I mean, I think that's like the ultimate in sports coverage, doing an Olympics. I'll tell you, just doing opening ceremonies in Sochi was like an incredible thrill for me just to see that. And I had worked at the 1988 Olympics in Korea, in Seoul. I did opening ceremonies, I did track and field there. So to see, you mentioned it a second ago when we started, to see the technology change just from the late 80s all the way into 2006, I guess it was. Um, the technology changed and made things so much different. And I want to say so much more fun to cover, but not so much easier because the technology is just outrageous, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, Years ago, we'd put a little camera, and I won't tell you what we called it, but I will tell you what it is because it's actually funny. We would put a little camera on a basketball net, and we would literally tape it with gaff tape. And it usually was a camera that we didn't mind losing. And we call it an LPS. Do you ever hear of that before?
No.
So you see those great shots. They now have remote cameras on the baskets of basketball games, and they can move a little and zoom in and zoom out. This was just a fixed camera, and it was called an LPS, and it stood for little piece of
Mm.
shit.
Got it.
Because it was a camera we didn't care about. But when you now look at technology with mounted cameras everywhere that are remotely controlled and sky cams and every piece of new equipment, it's just amazing the technology that's changed the way you cover sports and the way you do most entertainment shows.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been incredible for you, as you said, that you started in the 70s when radio was bigger than the TV productions, and then working through several Olympic Games. And I think Sochi was 2014, I think, right?
Was it 20?
I
Yes, it
think,
must have been. You're right, because I
yeah,
left NBC in 2015. So
yeah,
that was my last hurrah at NBC
yeah,
after 44 years.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
you have also done, I think, Super Bowls, World Series, and Wimbledon's, like a lot of
Right,
sporting
right,
events also.
right.
So,
Yeah, I've got a taste of just about everything. It's including there. We used to have a show on the air called Sports World, and we did sumo wrestling. And I remember going out to Nebraska, I believe it was, to do women's slow pitch softball. So we did lots of different sports. We covered a lot. You know, that was Sports World was kind of NBC's version of Wide World of Sports on ABC. Um, and I had the opportunity many, many times to go to watch sports in Europe and sports in Japan and South America. And that really made it interesting to see how some of the similar sports were done differently and televised differently, in different parts of the world. So it was really, I got to tell you, it was probably the most fun time you could have
yeah,
covering sports like that.
I can understand that. And from you, when explaining from behind the scenes, I really understand also what you said there, that it's a team sport.
For sure. I I don't think, lots of people know who directed this and who directed that. And I don't think people understand how many people it takes to put on a broadcast. And nowadays, with the amount of cameras and the amount of technology, it really is. I have a funny story to tell you. There's an expression in TV that when you make a mistake, we kind of say, well, it's not brain surgery, right? We're not
Yeah.
killing anybody. We're not up in a control tower controlling planes or doing an operation. And I did a game, I directed a football game in Washington, D.C. once, and I got on the plane to go to Washington, and this woman got on the plane. I wish I still had her contact information, but she got on the plane and she had a whole bunch of books in her hands, and her glasses were askew. And she sat down next to me, and we started this conversation. And she said, "So, do you live in Washington?" "No, I don't. I live in New York." She said, "Well, why are you coming to Washington?" I said, "I'm directing a football game." She said, "What does that entail?" And I told her all the little pieces of the game. And she said, "My God, that sounds so complicated." And I said, "So what do you do?" She said, "I'm chief surgeon at Children's Hospital in Washington." And I said, "We have an expression in television. It's not brain surgery." I said, "What you do is brain." So I invited her to the game, and she came to the game the next day, and she stood in the truck, And whenever I turned around and looked at her, she had her mouth open. Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this. And it's really funny how people perceive some of this. But sports television for sure is probably one of the most exciting and fun television you can do. And it
Yeah,
is a team sport by far.
I'm sure. Speaking of brain surgery, if my research is correct, I think that you directed something called Brain Surgery Live also, right?
Yeah. I right between when I left NBC and when I started to teach, because I'm at a university now, although I'm still directing, I'm working on a show for next July for the 250th anniversary of the United States. Um, I got an offer to go and direct a show for National Geographic, and I really wanted to when I heard about the show, I said, "Wow, this sounds really good." Went to sit and talk to the producers, and the thing that caught me the most was that it was the first live show that National Geographic had ever done. And so that really it got me excited. Out of all the National Geographic shows that I had watched as a kid and growing up, they were all taped, beautiful documentaries and shows. The shows. So we started to talk about this show with the two producers, and remember sitting in the room with them, and they said, "This is about brain surgery, and we're going to do a lot of pieces on the evolution of brain surgery and what the brain, where we are at now medically with the brain." And I said, "Well, sounds interesting." I said, "But honestly, I don't want to do a show that has a lot of blood and guts because I didn't really research it." And they said, "No, we are actually going to do a brain surgery during the show live." I went, wow. And we're going to have lots of pre-produced pieces on where brain surgery is now. And the name of the show is going to be Brain Surgery Live. And I said, "Oh, that's a horrible name. That sounds like we're going to be cutting people up on television." And when I really did see the show, the format of the show, I went, "Wow, this is just terrific." And we did. There were a lot of challenges. We had four cameras in an operating room with robotic cameras. Everything had to be sterilized. I had gone to, it was done in Cleveland. I went to Cleveland a number of times to stand next to the surgeon and watch the operation. It was a real thrill, actually. It was a real thrill. And we besides the fact that the where brain surgery is nowadays is amazing. It was just amazing to really watch and take part of that. I will tell you, one of the things that always amazes me, and I talk to people who are newly in sports or news a lot. One of the things that always amazes me is that as a director and producer, you become somewhat proficient or not an authority, don't get me wrong, but when you're tackling something like a show like that, you really get into an understanding of what happens. In other words, if I were doing a sport that I know nothing about, I would study up on the sport, the rules, how it's played. I'd watch film on it. But you really overnight have to become somewhat of an authority on what that is and how to cover it and what you would want a viewer to see. So for me, brain surgery was nowhere near anything I've ever seen. But by the time I did 4 or 5 visits to the hospital where they were doing it and watched the surgeons, you really start to understand not only how difficult that is, how difficult certain sports are to play, but how would I want to show people on what this looks like on television? And I think it's very interesting. I mean, if you think about it, at any news show like the Today Show, a producer who produces lots of different subjects may get a subject at 10 o'clock in the morning and they have to do a piece that airs the next day on the show. And overnight, they have to become somewhat of an authority. They have to figure out what the story is, find the people to interview, and edit a story for the next day. So it's a really fast-paced but career, but it's really, really cool to learn things. I've learned I've learned much more than I've ever learned in college or reading by just being assigned different things to learn. I probably directed more than 1,000 musical acts. And and I know pretty much about music. My family is very music oriented, but it's not till you start to direct things and want to show sports, music, news, whatever it is, to an audience. And brain surgery was something I had never done. I thought it'd be pretty cool, and it really ended up being a really, really cool broadcast. And again, it was the first live broadcast that Nat Geo did, so I was really, really, really proud to be part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very interesting to say that because I think like if you're a commentator for a sports game, then obviously you need to read up on the players, what are their
Right.
history, but maybe you don't assume that the director behind the TV production
Correct.
is, doing this type of research.
Correct. I have to tell you, I think sports, uh, I know news is important to know what's happening, but when you see a newscast or a news event, you rarely go back way back in time to compare it to another news event. I'm sorry, I should have shut this off.
It's okay.
Um, I you rarely see a commentator talking. They do compare it to historical things, maybe, but sports is the one place that, as a talent, I don't think you just become a talent overnight. If you hadn't grown up watching soccer, football in Europe, if you haven't grown up and knew the players and knew tradition of the sport, you're not going to be a good broadcaster. If you're in the United States, if you're not brought up to know that Mickey Mantle hit so number of home runs that you can compare to somebody who's getting close to that now, you're not going to be a good broadcaster. Sports fans want to hear the history, the comparisons, and I think sports is one of those rare broadcasting venues for talent that you really have to be brought up on it. It's something you can't just overnight learn, or even if you study for a long time. I'm not sure you can really become a great sportscaster if you have not been brought up in that.
Mm.
A lot of people probably have never thought about that, you know. Um, I see a lot of students at my university who want to be sports broadcasters, and I say, "Have you watched, have you watched this or that?" Well, I've never really watched that. Have you ever gone back and watched the first couple of what were not called this Super Bowls? Super Bowls wasn't called Super Bowl till Super Bowl three.
Mm.
They were called World Championship games. And they go, really? I go, yes. So you don't know the history of the Super Bowl. You better learn it before you start to try to cover football. And the best broadcasters, the Bob Costas, the people that have really shown through as talent in sports, they were brought up in it. But Bob always amazes me because he and I did something very similar. I don't know where this came from. My dad played baseball. I loved boxing growing up. And I wasn't allowed to watch boxing on television. There was very little boxing on television back then. But I would remember late at night listening to the radio, lying in my bed listening to boxing. And Bob said he used to do the same thing. Now he became a great broadcaster. I did not, um, but since childhood, if you watch a certain sport, that's going to be your sport. And as you know, many broadcasters, the great ones can do lots of different sports, but many of them specialize in certain sports and are great announcers and talent in that area. It's one of the rare broadcasting jobs that I think you really almost have to grow up into.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. You mentioned that we mentioned Sochi in 2014 and then that you left NBC in 2015,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
after that, where did your career go?
When I left the year after Sochi, I retired. I actually retired. Sochi was a one-off for me. I had not done sports in about, I don't know, 18 years, 20 years maybe. Little things here and there. I know I remember doing track and field, the Melrose games at Madison Square Garden during that period of time. But prior to Sochi, I had directed the Today Show for many years. And I what the reason I ended up doing Sochi is the fellow I mentioned before, Bucky Gunts, who had directed opening ceremonies literally for probably since the early 90s all the way through. He had retired, and um, a new director had come in, a senior director for NBC Sports, but he was going to do that primetime show where you're bringing in all the sports and getting ready for that. So they really had nobody that could have done opening ceremonies at the time, and so I was asked to do it, and it was pretty much my swan song from leaving NBC. So those Olympics were the last Olympics I went to. Prior to that, I had been directing the Today Show for many years.
Mm,
Um, which is again, which is it's a broadcasting dream to do a morning show with that many hours every single day, which encompassed everything from entertainment to heavy, heavy news. I actually still do a little bit of a speech about 9/11, being on the air for 9/11, which to me is the ultimate story you can tell is a story that is live and big, important, but you really don't know what's happening as you're on the air.
mm,
And I think it's a perfect example of a live news story. Um, and it unfolded over many, many hours. When it first happened, we just thought a small plane had hit one of the buildings in New York. And that went into, as you know, as everyone knows where it went. But that was a live news story, which I hate to put it this way, but it's still exciting to broadcast a big event like that. So to keep people informed and to tell a story, you know.
yeah. No, I can understand that. And you mentioned something before also that you're directing the for the 250th anniversary.
Yes, it's somewhat of a secret still. But
Okay.
I'll give you a hint what it is.
Yeah.
There are lots of happenings around the United States at that point in time on July 4th. And at this moment, we are pretty much in negotiations, but it's a big event that's going to happen on July 4th. And I really can't tell you what it is yet. But I love this kind of an event. I love when you can plan an event in long terms and really, really take a dive into it. Um, a friend of mine from CNN is producing it, and she called me and said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "I would love to." So we're really in the early stages, but I can't tell you what it is, unfortunately, but it's hopefully going to be a really, really cool event. I about every year I do one TV event that I feel is pretty large and something I really want to do, like the conventions. And I during the year, besides teaching, I do a lot of live corporate events, big events for we have one in February for John Deere Corporation, and it just keeps you busy, keeps you going, you know. And throughout the year, I'll do a commercial here or there, and you know, little projects like that. I'm 74 years old, and I have to tell you something. I am last year I was outrageously honored to be asked to do the Democratic Convention, which would air on all the networks. You know, it's one job that I have done off and on about every 4 years. And it's at my age, it's really fun to be able to do it, but it's really incredible that they still ask me to do stuff like that. You know, it's really cool.
Definitely.
Um, I will tell you about sports. Sports is a young man's business. And
Okay.
as much as I wouldn't mind doing a little bit of sports here or there, it's a young man's business. It's you've got to be really, really on the ball, keen, travel a lot. Um, I tell people that the last year that I did full-time sports was 1989, I guess, 88, 89. And I was on the road for about 260 days that year.
Mm.
So it's not for an old timer. An old timer will go do the opening Olympics and things, but for a full-time sports director, producer, graphic designer, whatever, you're going to be busy, really busy, you know.
Yeah. So sports is a young man's game, and there are new talent emerging, and you have decided to give back through teaching. So how did that decision come through?
Well, it was not. It was kind of out of left field. I've been in contact with the president of the university I teach at, and they asked if I would come and teach. And I said, I've never taught before. And as you can already tell, I talk a lot. And we had a long conversation, and they said, "Well, you want to give it a try?" I said, "I would try it for 1 year and see if I like it." Um, I went for that year. At the end of the year, I said, "I absolutely love it." And I will tell you, I'm very proud to tell you that a lot of my students have really succeeded. One in particular, who now directs for ESPN, he's he left university, started working for a small, not small production company called Tupelo Honey Productions. They do a lot of sporting events, mostly for ESPN. And he worked there for a year, went to ESPN, and so it's about a year and a half out, 2 years out, and he just won his first Emmy Award. So it makes you really feel like you've given back. And I can tell you, I've got a handful of students that have entered the business that I'm really proud of, and it at this point in my life, it's so great to see that happening. So I never thought t teaching would do that to me, but it's really, really something that just gives back to you, and you just go, "Wow, I helped them get to where they are." So it's
Yeah.
something really cool. Something really
That's
cool.
that's great and really admirable to, for someone, a young person, to have you as a mentor or a teacher that with the, 50 something years of experience. That's
Sounds so
invaluable,
strange to hear
but
that.
that's invaluable for someone who's up and coming, right? To have
Yeah,
that. So,
yeah. And I mean, I'm just thrilled. And you really do get a great feeling to see. There's a young student right now who is an anchor now. She actually the girlfriend of the guy I just mentioned, and she wanted to be a reporter, and she went out. We really supported her, and not just a couple of months ago, she's now an anchor at a local station, and you just get a great feeling when you see that. I will confess. Um, that I have about 3 or 4 students at the Today Show who are working, mostly digital. That's where the world is now. They're on the digital side, but it's just a thrill. It's just a thrill, to see.
yeah,
Just a thrill. And if I could give them any help as far as the business, where it came from and where it is, that's what I think I'm here for. I will tell you that and you know this, lots of your listeners would know this too. Technology's changed everything. And for somebody like me, who is pretty much an old timer, I still keep up with the new technology immensely. I go to seminars. I go to the National Association of Broadcasters conference every year just to keep up with things. And things are changing so rapidly that it's hard to keep up with. The technology alone is frightening.
yeah,
We're now into virtual reality that's used in sports television. We're into new kinds of cameras, high-speed cameras, and sky cams and everything else that goes along with it. And it's fascinating to watch, but it's also hard to keep up with. But I do my best to keep up with it because I want students, especially when they go out into the real world, to really understand what's out there for them. And the technology is the biggest thing.
yeah. Yeah, definitely technology has changed the media industry a lot. So if for someone as yourself who has been in this industry for a long time now, and you said that this has been one big change, looking ahead, where do you see sports media and production, going in the future?
I think well, I obviously think it's getting better and better. The technology is making it better for the viewer, without a doubt. I hate to single out Fox Sports, since I'm an old NBC guy, but their technology is amazing. Their replays are done at a higher resolution than what they broadcast, which means they can zoom in on things on a football field and show it in very, very high quality to the viewer, even though, in other words, if the game is being broadcast in 4K, some of their cameras are 8K. So when they zoom into something, you see it crystal clear. And I think that's going to keep happening. I have a really good friend who tried to work in virtual reality for sports, and we discussed it a lot because even though it'll look really cool, sports is something shared. So if you and I are watching a game together, we want to talk about that game and our favorite players and what's going on. Virtual reality kind of doesn't lean us toward that. And for a while, everybody thought that's might be where it was headed. I just think it's going to get better technology wise and coverage wise. Um, I think I will tell you again. I'm going to go back to Harry Coyle. I'm going to tell you a funny story. We were doing a sports truck. We were in a sports truck one day, and Harry was choosing um, shots to take. And I believe it was during a playoff or World Series game. And Harry had a rough voice. And he turned at me and he said, this had to be in the late 70s, early 80s. Harry turned to me and he said, someday people are going to be at home and they're going to be able to pick the cameras they want to see. And I believe that that's happened. I mean, they've tried it on the internet a few times, but I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see an Olympic event where you could see all the cameras at the same time and pick the ones you want to see. You want to see a player that's doing a certain sport and you just want to isolate on that player. I think you'll be able to do that at some point. The streaming services now allow you to watch more than one game at a time.
Yeah.
So why not watch more than one camera at a time? So I think where we're headed is exciting, and I think it's because of the technology that we have. I really do.
How would that, like a lot of people say that what will AI technology, will that replace my position? If you're having all of these cameras and the viewer is choosing which camera he or she wants to
It
watch,
does it does replace directors.
that was my question. How will that,
It does, but it doesn't tell a story. I still think we're ways away that AI could tell a story in an emotional way. As a director, no matter what you're covering, you're picking and choosing cameras. You're picking and choosing tape to put into things. It's emotional. If I were doing a concert and a AI director was doing a concert, they may be cutting to certain things that randomly, or a guitar plays, say, or somebody's doing a touchdown, and the camera stays on that touchdown, but doesn't show reactions of other things. I think that's the emotional part of what a director does. Um, I teach in school. I teach basic interview directing, and a basic interview directing. Um, what makes a really good director is not that the camera's on you when you talk and the camera's on me when I talk. It's when you say something that either makes me happy, mad, I react, that I cut to that reaction. That's what makes that interview, not just cutting between the two of us. The reaction shots in a sporting event are what make a sporting event emotional. As I said before, tight close-ups, the eyes of a pitcher, the hands, the batter's eyes, say, football, people interacting in football on the bench. That's what tells a story. And at the moment, I don't think AI can do that.
let's see where it's heading.
It's really interesting when you start to think about all that. Um, I know that the chat GPTs of the world that a lot of students like can do amazing things, but I still think the live coverage of a sporting event, entertainment, I think that I don't think it's there yet that they can actually um, cut a story. There's some technology that does that on a corporate level, and I'm just not sure it can show the emotion and literally tell a real story, either in a news or a sporting event.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. That AI is great and ChatGPT, but as you said, it doesn't have emotions, right? So when you need to
Right.
capture that emotion, that's a human trait.
I'm a little afraid if it does have emotion. Then it'll happen. There was a great director at NBC who directed lots of the early Super Bowls, Teddy Nathanson, and Teddy was so caught up into the game, and I can't imagine that. And told stories, the stories just like Harry Coyle. These were storytellers as directors. There is a director at ABC who put together a small tape a number of years ago about news directors. And at the time, I was a news director. And he talked about the fact that we know the names of lots and lots of film directors. And you may know the names of some sports directors, famous ones, but you don't know the name of many or any news directors. But we are the people that have given you a look at history. 9/11 is a perfect example. The shots that I chose to broadcast with 9/11 are historic. And on an event like 9/11, the shots that I didn't show made, there were things on 9/11 that I couldn't show. Unfortunately, people falling out of buildings, things like that, I could not show on television. But I tried to show a story, and that becomes history. The large history events that you've seen and I've seen on TV have we've directors have shown you though. There are shots that directors have showed you. Or the director who showed the Olympics in Munich with the kill. I to this day I remember those pictures like they were yesterday, of the people on the roofs with guns. And I mean, you'll never forget. That's historic things that directors have shown the world, and they're historic, but nobody remembers those directors' names. It's kind of interesting when you start to think about what directing and producing has been over the years in many parts of media.
Yeah. No, that is very interesting for sure. So you're the unseen heroes in a while, but you have got some recognitions. You have won a handful of Emmys. You mentioned that one of
Yeah,
your you
yeah.
mentioned that one of your students won one. You have won, is it 10? 8, 10?
I've won about, so there's lots of different Emmys. There's Emmys. If you show up to an event and the event wins an Emmy, you win an Emmy. I have about 8 individual Emmys. They're individual. They're that Emmys that I had won, and I don't know how many shows I've been on that won Emmys, but probably quite a few, especially Olympics and some of the news shows. I think it's an honor to win any kind of an award. And recently I went back and saw that I won a award. I forgot completely about this. I won an award for a documentary in radio from the New York Borough Association. And I went, wow, I don't even remember winning that. Awards are fun. I think television has always been a passion for me. So the awards don't mean as much to me, I guess, as some others. Um, but we talked about it a minute ago. My reward now is to see a student go out and do something really cool. I feel so much more about that than I do winning an Emmy. Now, I will tell you, the first time I won an Emmy, I thought it was really cool, but and it's great negotiating for salaries. But I think I'd rather hear somebody give me a call after a TV show and go, "Hey, that was really cool." That personal thing is really cool. Um, I don't know. It's fun to win awards, but I think I got as big a thrill out of me winning one than my student Thomas when he won one. It's really cool to see, you
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
passing it down.
Definitely. Has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Um, I didn't get a few jobs that I really wanted, especially, believe it or not, if I ever wrote a book, the title of the book would be Lucky. I think that anybody who's in any area wants to be the best they can, but they may get that one lucky break. And when they get that one lucky break, they have to perform. If they don't perform, they're not going to move forward. I don't think at NBC, I gradually grew as I always say, I grew up at NBC. And I think I was lucky enough to grow forward. A couple times I didn't go fast enough. And I think I had the patience to wait and hope that I was going to go further, but I studied more and more and tried to understand more and more. Um, I When I left NBC, there were a couple jobs that I said I am the best person for this job that I didn't get, and I refer back to something. My daughter is an actress, and whenever she didn't get a job, I said, Natalie, you don't know what they were looking for. You will never know. You might think you're the best for a role, but you don't know what they're looking for. So when I left NBC and I said, maybe maybe I'll try to get an interview for this job or that job, and I went and did it. I won't tell you the shows, but I didn't get it. I went, maybe I'm not what they were looking for. So, were they bumps? They're little bumps, but I think you take those and learn from them and try to move forward, you know. I don't think I ever had a big bump that I say, hey, that really hurt my career. Um, I know that there were a few times I made decisions that I thought were the right decision at the time. And even though I say, oh, I'm going to regret this, but then later on it turned out okay. I know at one point I was going to leave NBC. I'd been there about 20 years maybe, and I was going to go and work on a sitcom in LA. And at the last minute, I went, I got a great deal here. I'm doing great. I was in sports, love traveling. I'm still young. And I turned the job down. And as it was, they made the pilot and the show was never picked up. So I went back and looked. All right, I was lucky with that one,
Yeah.
because I would have left. So, there's times that you have that time to make a career. And I even tell students now, whatever it is, go with your gut.
Yeah.
Where your gut's going to tell you whether you should go or not and take that chance. You know.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say something like, and that show turned out to be Friends or something like that.
No, no, no. Well, I would have been very disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there was ever anything like that. Um, Geez, I don't know. I can't think of anything like that. I, geez, I don't know. I know I've applied for shows. I've applied, especially when I left NBC. There were a few shows that I would have loved to do, and I didn't get them. And the timing isn't right sometimes. And
Yeah.
and I don't mean to be sound depressed about this, but when you get older, people are looking for younger energy. And especially with directors, they're looking for some real new ideas, and that's one of the things that I've tried to learn more to teach more about. And I then look back and say, maybe that wasn't meant to be, obviously, but I can't think of any time that I've really hit a bump that I went, oh, this is the end of my career.
Yeah.
It always
Eh,
seemed to work out. I have to tell you that I really have always felt very, very, very lucky to be put in the places that I've been put in.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're 74 years old, working like never before. So,
I love this.
do you
Yeah.
see yourself working, until the end of time, or
Yep.
is there a
Yep.
time when you want to just
No,
be
I'm not going
retired?
to retire. I'm
No.
not going to retire. I mean, teaching to me, everybody goes, "Oh, when are you going to leave teaching?" I go, "This is a great way to retire. It's actually to me the best way to retire. If you can now take things that you've done all these years and teach it, and have people understand it from the active point of view, that this is what I've done. Let me tell you how I've done it, and hopefully it'll help you. Why would you want to stop that? And again, it goes back to the technology and where we've come in broadcasting, that I still like to keep my feet wet when I can in doing live television, or going to conventions and really keeping up with the times, so I can bring what I've learned in the past to where it's at now. I mean, I love TV and film history. There was a woman who directed she directed early movies, and she worked with a silent picture star who moved all around the set and couldn't stop moving because of silent pictures where they move a lot. And she couldn't get her on mic. So she literally went to a stagehand and said, "Would you do me a favor? Would you go get me a fishing pole?" And the guy didn't know what the heck she was talking about. He brought her a fishing pole. They hung a microphone from it and held it over this person moving around. And she basically invented the boom microphone. So the history of film and television, I love to talk about the history and where it is today, and how we've evolved and why we've evolved. Many times we've evolved by the fact that we had to, you know.
Yeah.
Sports Super Bowl directors have been criticized over the years for missing a shot or not having an angle. So now they have 200 cameras for a Super Bowl, and they're in the stanchions. They're everywhere. They're two layers of sky cam. So there's no excuse to miss anything anymore. But that's what technology's done for us. You know,
Yeah.
the replays are always the best.
Yeah, that's true.
Pretty crazy. Pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
it is crazy. I've had the honor to have you an hour here on the show. I like to end on a networking question.
Yes.
So, who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this show?
Oh my God, there's so many. Um, let's see who now a sports person.
Yes, please.
John Gonzalez, who's directed many shows, is probably a really good person to talk to. Um, I believe John now still directs, and he's probably around my age. I believe John directs a live police show. I forget what it's called, but the premise of the show is they have live cameras with 4 different cities around the United States, and they go to those cameras live as the police patrol. So he's probably a great person to talk. He's very sports oriented and stayed in sports for his whole career until he retired. Um, I can get you his information.
Yeah.
There's a few people like that. There's quite a few people like that.
Yeah.
Um, the fellow I don't know him very well, but the fellow who just directed the last Super Bowl just retired. I can get you any of these guys information.
That's fantastic.
Why don't I put together a little list of these guys for you? You
Thank you.
know, you're in you do a lot of sports management stuff. Um, the CEO of the Mavericks is one of our people who comes to our campus and teaches.
Oh, wow, that would be fun.
She comes a lot if you're interested in somebody like that.
100%.
Yeah, she's an incredible lady. She actually takes every semester 2 or 3 students down to Dallas, and they watch what she does. We actually have a very big sports management major on my campus.
Hmm?
It's actually in the School of Communication. I believe it's our largest major.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, yeah, so she's one of our, we call them innovators in residence or artists in residence. I can totally give you her information.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
uh,
fantastic. Thank you so much.
yeah, yeah. She's terrific. But some of the people who are doing sports now, you know what? It might even be kind of cool to talk to Thomas, who's brand new in the sports world, winning his first Emmy Award. You know, somebody like that,
Definitely.
because he may have a really good view of where the industry's going.
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
for sure.
So I'll make you a list. I'll make you a list of stuff and send it along to you.
Appreciate that.
And I do have some of the contact numbers and stuff too,
Yeah,
which would be
that's
great.
perfect.
Yeah,
Joe,
really cool.
yeah, for sure. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management
I,
Podcast.
it's my pleasure, totally.